Hi everyone. I've just heard the news that Frankie Banali, legendary heavy metal drummer, has passed away at the age of 68. Frankie was diagnosed in April of 2019 with pancreatic cancer, and all through his battle with the disease, he still did interviews and played with Quiet Riot when he could, showing us all his heart, strength, and courage. Frankie is most remembered for being the drummer in the chart-topping heavy metal band Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot being one of the first bands to have a #1 album on the Billboard album charts with their first album, Metal Health. Frankie joined the band in the early 80s and was there from the beginning with them on Metal Health. He was not in the band for the two Japanese-only Randy Rhoads albums, but came in for their first international released album, Metal Health, and then played on all the band's albums. He continued the band even after his friend and lead singer, Kevin Dubrow, had passed away in 2007. And a documentary was made about his struggles to keep the band alive called Well, Now You're Here, There's No Way Back, giving you a real insight into Frankie's passion and dedication to music and to Quiet Riot. Frankie had played in other bands outside of, as well as Quiet Riot, one of them being W.A.S.P, who he played on their 1989 album, The Headless Children. He also played on the 1992, The Crimson Idol, as well as 6 other albums with W.A.S.P. But like I mentioned, he's most remembered for his time with Quiet Riot. So I just wanted to highlight a couple Quiet Riot albums for you and just talk to you about what a great drummer Frankie was. And for me, he is one of my favorite heavy metal drummers from the 80s. He was that rare combination of feeling and sound. For me, he was a heavy metal version of John Bonham. He had that big, heavy, driving groove type feel. And his drum sound was always stood out to me. He had a very signature, kind of unique drum sound, very big, just like John Bonham or maybe Vinny Appice or Cozy Powell. And in my opinion, his drum sound and his drum playing and his drum feel were a very big signature part of the Quiet Riot sound. So I'm just going to highlight a couple Quiet Riot records here. This is the 1983, his first album that he released with the band, 1983's Metal Health. You have the awesome title track with his, again, his big, heavy grooving, those big cymbal hits. I think about the middle where it just drops down to the bass and he's playing along there. Just a great feel and a great sound. Come On, Feel the Noise with that big drum intro. As soon as you hear that, as soon as you hear that first drum hit, you know what that song is. The song Breathless on here is a great rocker where Frankie is just driving that song along. And to me, that was part of his feel, the way he was able to push and drive the band. Great drum fills in that song. The second Quiet Riot album, Condition Critical. The song Sign of the Times starts off with a big drum intro. Drum intros were almost a signature of the Quiet Riot sound. These big drum intros from Frankie. Mama, We're All Crazy Now is much like Come On, Feel the Noise, starts off with the big drums. My favorite song from this record, Condition Critical. Again, it's that Bonham, big, open, heavy, driving groove. And even though he's playing just a simple drum beat, you can tell that it's him and it just sounds great. He had the ability to play these slower type drum beats and just really, even though they were slow and back in the pocket, he was able to push them and drive them along. Quiet Riot 3, one of my favorite songs from the 80s melodic LA metal era The Wild and the Young. Starts off with that amazing drum solo. Whenever I hear that drum solo, I always think of that video where he's behind his drum set, sort of sets up his drums and da do do da da do ga 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 go go go. Just great, man. And Frankie always had a big drum set. He was one of those drummers that you wanted to watch him. He had a big drum set. Uh, he looked great when he was playing, you know. He just looked cool, and lots of drums on the stage. Always sounded great. I saw them on the Alive and Well tour, which was a reunion sort of tour of sorts. Rudy Sarzo, Kevin DuBrow was still alive at that point. And then I saw them, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, at the M3 Festival, which is a festival that happens in Maryland every year. And this was after Kevin had passed. And I had just recently looked on YouTube to see if I could find any video clips from that show that I went to. And I found somebody had recorded a couple songs from their set. And it reminded me of what I was thinking when I was there, which is his sound and his feel was such a part of Quiet Riot. A lot of people doubted, like, well, everybody, when after Kevin DuBrow passed, a lot of people doubted whether he should continue on with the band. But when I heard them at M3, I was like, wow, he is such a big part of the sound of this band. He sounded great. He looked super cool when he was up there playing. Great feel, great sense of timing, and his drum fills were all awesome. So, and that's what made me a believer and made me realize that, you know, he was just as much a part of the Quiet Riot sound as anybody else was through the band's history. Like I mentioned earlier in the documentary, Well Now You're Here, There's No Way Back, you really get insight into Frankie's heart and passion for Quiet Riot and for the music, and what a struggle for him it was after his friend Kevin DuBrow had passed away, but how he just soldiered on. And I had heard some interviews with him, like with Eddie Trunk, and talking about how he was still fighting. And it's just really sad news. We were all hoping that Frankie would get through this. So thank you, Frankie, for all these great albums. Thank you for your great drumming. Thank you for your heart, your dedication, and your passion to heavy metal. And let's crank up some of these albums and bang our heads. So, Frankie Banali, rest in peace.